You're on this side.
I keep moving around. Well, let's talk about debt. The Republicans have become the kings of deficit and debt creation. Afghanistan war, Iraq war, the Bush tax cuts, the Trump 1 tax cuts, now the Trump 2 tax cuts. But it's not just legislation in which they have driven up the deficits and the debt. It's also by modifying and undermining the structure of the process that was designed to control debt, specifically the 1974 Budget and Impoundment Act. It was 2 decades and 2 years after that bill passed, Republicans said, well, this bill, it was only for deficit reduction, but we're going to use it for tax cuts that drive up the deficit. Well, that was huge damage to the ability of Congress to make sure that we had a special pathway for reducing deficits. Instead, they turned it into a pathway for increasing them, and increasing them massively. And now we have the Republicans saying, well, there are 2 things that survived our 1996 massacre of the 1974 Act, and that was there could be no deficits after 10 years, and we'd continue to use honest numbers from the Joint Committee on Taxation, honest numbers from the Congressional Budget Office. But now, the Republicans in the Senate are saying, let's get rid of both of those forms of discipline as well. There is a provision in Section 313 that says, absolutely, there can be no deficit creation after the budget window for the reconciliation bill. That's a 10-year window. But Republicans are, speaking of windows, they're throwing that out the window. And the process was designed to create this new organization, Congressional Budget Office, to give us honest numbers. Quit lying to ourselves. Quit lying to the American people about what things cost. Get rid of the smoke and mirrors. That was a form of discipline that is also being thrown out with this so-called current policy baseline. Now, that strategy, invented out of thin air by the Republicans, comes from Section 312. So I just want to encourage you all to be a little bit educated about Section 312. This is the history of Section 312.
One good turn deserves another.
Oh, there we go. Thank you very much. Section 312 has always been used only on a bipartisan basis. Section 312 has only been used on very narrow provisions. Section 312 has always been resolved in that bipartisan way to resolve a small ambiguity. And it has never, ever been used in reconciliation because 312 wasn't about reconciliation. Section 313 is about reconciliation. Thank you very much.
My pleasure, Chair.
You did that really well. And so let's turn to Section 313. And what does it say? It has 5 provisions that say, or 5 elements that say, look at each provision and find out how much it changes revenue or how much it changes costs. This is the 313. I've circled a whole bunch of things here. It says, check this provision. In other words, check what the law, proposed law is, each provision, find out how much it costs or how much revenue it produces or decreases. And how do you do that? You say, here's the provision versus if the provision wasn't there. What is that? That is a comparison to current law. So let me be absolutely clear. Section 312 has no role in reconciliation. It's being used completely out of place, and it's inherently inconsistent. Let me give you 2 examples. In the middle of the 10-year window, Republicans are stopping some tax provisions. Under their theory of current policy, you would continue to cost those out over the 10-year period because you're assuming that they go on after they are dying in law. So they're saying, well, provisions that were in previous law, we're assuming those continue forever, even though the law says they don't. And then they're saying provisions that we're creating and saying, stop, actually stop. Totally inconsistent. Or look at another inconsistency. Look at that $5 trillion debt ceiling increase they're putting in. Why is that there? Because the bill increases the debt massively over the couple coming years. So just really want to say we are going to contest the obliteration of fiscal discipline. We are tired of hearing Republicans say they are champions of fiscal responsibility when they do legislation after legislation that drives us into massive deficit and debts, and then proceed to dismantle the bipartisan structure that was designed to create discipline over the budgeting process.
Thank you, Jeff. I just want to show everyone how diligent he is. Look at this.
Leader Schumer.
Questions? Stop yelling. Stop yelling.